Checking out the army tab, armies are about the same right now. The supply is hugely favoring the Zerg player because of all those extra workers. Terran player is finally getting his 4th established, but the rest of his patches are actually not that well saturated at all. The main is almost mined out, the natural is almost mined out, so he needs to actually take another expansion as soon as possible. These Marines really get kind of ditched, but the Zerglings just run right past them. Tanks are not sieged. It's a terrible engagement for the Terran player, and he just gets dominated. This planetary fortress is likely going to fall if he can muster up the forces to do it. This Baneling is trying to get in, and he just barely gets it down with just a few units remaining. So this is devastating for the Terran player to lose that expansion. And for the Zerg, since he has such a huge economy, he can really just re-macro his army. There's 52 Zerglings on the way. Level 3 attacks and the crackling upgrades are almost done, so those Zerglings are just going to chew right through whatever the Terran player throws down. Terran's bio is at 2-3, which is really good, but the cracklings make you attack so much faster on these Zerglings that they will be putting out damage in a hurry. Once that crackling speed finishes, you will see this weapon speed change. We'll take a look at it once it gets there. Baneling's being morphed, but he's going to catch all these Banelings in production. They will likely still finish just because of how small of a force this is and how many Zerglings there are just to eat this damage. But once he's finished, he's going to have to load up into his medevacs once again in order to get out of here so he doesn't lose all his Marines. If he doesn't, there's going to be a big acid leftover residue of all these Marines, but he does load up a whole bunch of them in medevacs. More Banelings pushing in order to try to take out these Thors. But the good thing about Thors is that they can take so much damage. Look, there's no Banelings left, and all of a sudden he has a whole bunch more Marines that he can drop on this expansion and try to harass it some more. 32 more Zerglings and 3 Mutalisks on the way. So we're just seeing a battle between micro and macro, essentially, as the Zerg player can just dump out an army whenever he wants, while the Terran player has to make such good use of all of his units. There's still a few Marines standing, which are going to take out a few drones, but you're not going to kill drones very fast. More Zerglings here to reinforce. They're going to easily clean this up, especially if the Mutalisks are here to pick off these dropships, but more Marines come in to reinforce, so a constant battle going on here. Behind all this, we do see on the minimap the Zerg has taken their 6th base, so the Zerg player is still doing a fantastic job of macroing here while all this is going on. 3-3 is almost done on the Zerg melee units. This hatchery is going to fall, and all these drones are being pulled rather foolishly to these Marines. You have to almost wonder if he didn't care about those drones to just dump some supply so that he could free up and get maxed out as soon as possible. More Zerglings and Mutalisks on the way. You almost kind of feel that he is reinforcing with too small of a force in order to try to clean this up. But the Terran player does retreat with 2 medevacs full of Marines. So you can see the kind of unit control really coming into handy for this Terran player. We're going to see another massive drop here from the Terran player, loading up into all of his medevacs. These medevacs are still seeking around for one or two more units to load in there, or he's just going to fly home. Never mind. Checking over here, yeah, we do see this 6 up, like we had mentioned, and good protection here from any sort of drops to at least delay this hatchery from going down if a drop does occur. There are some medevacs perhaps just trying to sniff around the map and see if he can find a free expansion. Apparently he did care about those drones because he is now back up to 95 harvesters, which again is really high if you're a player in the late game, but you have to really fear for this Terran player. He's only at 45 harvesters, which will not put out a large enough army soon enough, and you have to eventually feel that unless this great micro continues, that the Zerg player is eventually just going to overwhelm him due to just sheer production potential. This tank is getting taken down by all these Zerglings, but again, fantastic unit control to make the most of all these units. He's taking out all these Mutalisks so that once all these units are cleaned up, he can just jump in these medevacs if he needs to. These medevacs really need to catch up to these Marines so they don't get ditched, and you almost feel like every single Marine is important due to the huge disparity between incomes at this point. Checking the production tab, there are 32 more Zerglings here, so the Zerg is being very sloppy with his units while the Terran is being very meticulous with them all. More Zerglings come in here to try and clean this up. You have to almost feel like he's just not committing enough of a force to try and take these out. You just can't get that maxed out army to deal with this force, and now you actually see the Terran player ahead in supply. Units lost will show the Terran player almost 2-to-1ing the ratio of units lost in terms of resources invested. So in terms of economy, if he is down by half in economy, he is making it up for his fantastic work with his Marines and his tanks and positioning and whatnot. He has really thought out all these battles, engaging only in areas that are going to be favorable. There was a small advancement here from tanks and Marines. The Zerglings are going to clean these up fairly well. There are only a couple of tanks standing. This Queen decides to go out and sacrifice herself for the swarm. So she is a nice big glob of guts here on the ground. And That was odd. The roach just kind of disappeared there for a second. There we go, he finally kills him. That was strange. Anyway, more advancement in here from the Terran player, just trying to knock down as many expansions as possible. You see the Zerg is still expanding all over the map, now has another base over here at the third of the top base if someone were to spawn there, loading up these Marines in the medevacs again. Again, just an unreal unit control here from the Terran player to get all of his units off the ground when they need to be off the ground. You'd almost like to see the Zerg player commit more to anti-air to try and kill these medevacs. There is a really brave drone here killing these tanks, and everyone's just standing around watching while this drone is like, look guys, I can take these guys down, and he is eventually going to kill this tank if he's not careful, doing 4 damage per hop, and he finally got sick of him and took him out. So, some weird stuff going on here with some Zerg units. Banelings are coming in on these Marines. If they're not aware, they're going to all be blown up by those Banelings. And wow, there's a lot of Marines in the red. There are a few Marines still standing, so good engagement there by the Zerg player. He's distance mining from this base onto his macro hatch. But all these drones are just conga lining into death. The Zerg player is just not paying attention to all these drones, and the Zerg player is starting to crumble here. He has very little production. He does good game out. Wow. So this will show you that if you go over that harvester account, you're not really getting that much of an advantage in terms of economically. And this base was also taken out. I'm sorry we missed that. You're not getting that much of an advantage economically, and if it's more important to make sure you're getting the best usage out of your units. And you can see that the Terran player was throwing all of his Marines in his medevacs at the last second in order to try to deal as much damage and then get off the ground so that the Zerg forces could not do very much. And he was doing it very meticulously while keeping tanks on the ground, while keeping Thors on the ground to eat damage and deal damage to the remaining Zerg units. So, interesting game. It was virtually micro versus macro that game. It's not very often you see a game go this long at this high of a level where someone stays on 45 harvesters. You will almost always want to get up to that like 60 to 70 harvester count, and if he did, he could have a lot more production out of all these buildings and thus field a lot larger force, but whatever works for you, right? So cool game here. Again, this map is not in the pool for ladder maps right now, considering it is just a GSL map. If you have your own replays for future casts, go ahead and upload them to virtually any file sharing site, or there are a lot of Starcraft replay sites out there that you can upload it to. Just search for Starcraft replay sites and load them up there and send them on over to me if you have cool games. I will cast it and I'll post it if it turns out to be interesting enough for a lot of people to want to see. So go ahead and send those over if you have them, and we will be signing out until next time. Take it easy.